Hello and welcome to the Center for Military Modernization, Warrior Maven. Very significant conversation today in a changing global threat environment. We are joined by two representatives of industrial-based coalitions, one for the Amphibious Warship-based coalition, as well as one for the aircraft carriers, who have a specific expertise with construction and development of aircraft carriers and amphibious assault ships. So let's make sure to welcome Captain Dave Foster, who is actually a former Navy captain who was the manager of the USS Zumwalt, the well-known famous stealthy destroyer program, and a former surface warfare officer. And Richard Giannini, who's in charge of the aircraft carrier industrial-based coalition. He is also the CEO of the Milwaukee Valve Company. So both of these experts have a deep knowledge of Navy needs and, of course, the Navy situation. Thanks for both of you joining us today. If I recall, Admiral Gilday, the CNO of the Navy, specifically is now calling for a 500-ship Navy. That has long been on the radar as a point of discussion among decision makers and advocates for a larger Navy in the growing threat environment. So should this be the case, and there is a continued expansion of shipbuilding, I'd love to get each of your thoughts on the pace and capabilities of the industrial base to accommodate that. We can start with amphibs and then go to carriers.
So we believe in support of the CNO's stated need for 500 ships, that the industrial base is well suited to be able to support that. We believe with what actually Secretary Gertz did as part of the pandemic, which was in essence stabilizing the workforce by pushing acquisition, pushing contracts. He maintained that industrial base such that they're able to stand up and to begin to execute what Admiral Gilday envisions as the future of the Navy.
Very interesting. And on the carrier front, Mr. Giannini?
Yes, the carrier subgroup, we are, Milwaukee Valve is part of all vessels. We service all of them as ACIBC. I'm chairman of just aircraft carriers. The entire industrial base is excited to hear the 500 ship Navy. We fully believe that predictable and stable funding, which has come from the 2 ship buys for our carriers, along with the block buys for subs, have been a major part of the ability of the industrial base to get their jobs done, and look forward to building more.
Roger that. Important perspective. Now let's talk initially about amphibious assault ships, the America class, extremely significant. On track, there's the third one with the well deck now under construction. The first 2 are essentially operational. The USS America has deployed with as many as 13 or so F-35s on board. So it's the introduction of 5th generation air power in conjunction with essentially a new generation of amphibious warfare technology. Is this program on pace, and is there any thinking about potentially accelerating it, despite the fact that it's already on pretty solid track?
Well, we believe with the addition of the additional ship in the president's budget for 23, that does help to stabilize the program as it needs to be. And it keeps the build cycle on a repetition center that really does allow us to stabilize the workforce and allow us to get efficient with respect to the costs, contain the costs. As we know, the inflationary price pressures today in the market can create a lot of risk in the pricings of ships, spot prices on supplies as well as labor. So the idea of putting them on 3.5-year centers will allow us to be able to impart some hedge strategies to try and contain all of that. But furthermore, to your point, with the F-35s on board, with the ability to deliver ship-to-shore connectors with Hellcats, with Marines, I mean, the stated mission of these ships is they're so very capable to be able to handle almost any need that the nation has.
Well, roger that. And in fact, the America class, as you know, far better than myself, I'm sure, are specifically engineered to accommodate the F-35. Modifications were made to the America so that the non-skid, I believe it's called, in the heat of a vertical takeoff and landing of the F-35B could be accommodated. So this is extremely significant. I heard not long ago, I believe it was the Surface Naval Association, a senior leader of expeditionary warfare for the Navy. This is a follow-up for amphibs. Talk about manned-unmanned teaming. We all see proliferation and the rapid uptick of unmanned systems for amphibious warfare in the Navy writ large. I believe one leader said, and specifically, that these big deck amphibs could focus to some extent as motherships, coordinating massive fleets of unmanned systems. That's a key element of amphibious warfare strategy, given distributed maritime operations and the need to be dispersed. What is your sense of the industrial base's capacity to absorb the advent of large numbers of amphibs and unmanned systems?
We believe that the industrial base can accept additional ships in the build cycle, perhaps aggressively reduce some of that build time, which again creates headspace and timing in order to accept additional ships. We look forward to trying to travel down that path and see if that's executable.
Indeed, very important question given the strategic shift and adjustment to the threat landscape. Mr. Giannini, carriers, Ford class, so significant. What is your sense of how that is progressing in terms of an industrial base? There's obviously the midlife refueling as well. What is your sense of the pace of development? Are the Fords on track? Could they be accelerated?
They are on track. The Ford carrier, as you know, has 23 of the most advanced new systems on that ship. First of the class in CVN 78, just paraphrasing SecNav, he says absolutely ready to fight. So I would say we're on track with 78. When we get to 79, it is scheduled for delivery in 2024, on track. The EMAL system will be up this year, February, for approximately 83% complete at this point. And when you talk about CVN 80 and 81, the Enterprise and Doris Miller, those were bought under a block buy, which has dramatically reduced the cost, according to the Navy, by $4 billion. I could speak specifically about the block buy and the funds that were received in terms of advanced procurement funds, the AP money. It allowed us to put many valves on that ship by buying them all up front, lowering the cost and reducing the lead time, saving the Navy money. So I think we're ready and looking forward to building them on 4-year centers over 8 years with more AP funds so that more suppliers like Milwaukee Valve could benefit from the savings, which will be passed on to the taxpayers.
Indeed. A couple quick follow-ups. One, I was impressed by the Ford's performance in shock trials. As you know, there was some discussion about whether there would be shock trials. Sure enough, the survivability based on the assessment are quite positive in terms of its ability to withstand nearby explosions. So given that, what's your sense of additional technological enhancements to the Ford class as they continue to mature?
Well, speaking from the supply base, I'm not as versed with technical aspects going forward. What I will say and comment on the shock test, which was very impressive, full ship shock test with very little issues that weren't able to be resolved on the ship itself. So from that perspective, outstanding performance, setting us up. What I will say is that going forward, they're going to incorporate newer technologies along with the whole air wing. So trying to do things in concert, which should prove to last, for decades to come.
That's critical in terms of continued modernization. I'm really glad you made that point because the U.S. footprint, the Navy footprint with aircraft carriers is arguably so dominant globally in terms of global presence, and forward presence will be so key, especially in places like the Pacific. But as a follow-up, I had an interesting thought about the Ford class because there's so much discussion about delays, cost overruns, etc. Yet I remember covering it at the time and talking to the program managers. They talked about non-recurring developmental costs, that because there was the advent of some cutting-edge technologies, there were some initial expenses up front to lay the foundational, the groundwork for years of modernization. So what is your sense of the cost efficiency moving forward, because that gets so many eyeballs in Congress?
That is absolutely right. As you mentioned, it has more technologies than any other carrier brought forward at one point in time. And while, yes, there were some delays and some cost overruns, in comparison, to prior carriers. They're a fraction of the overruns. And I might not be 100% right, but I know that the majority of the issues found, like over 80% of them, were able to be resolved on board the ship without having to come back into the yard. So I would say technically it's outstanding. Going forward, it will be a fantastic ship, and 79 is definitely lower, and 80 and 81 are going to be lower cost yet because of those block buys.
Roger that. Sure. I recall the block buys. Indeed. Well, before we go, quick question for both of you. And this is the significance of the Chinese threat. I recall writing years ago about how the Chinese Navy was on track to pass the U.S. Navy. And sure enough, in terms of just sheer numbers, that's been the case. Now, of course, it doesn't mean there's an actual overmatch or superiority in any way. But if you read the Chinese papers, the 075 amphibs, I believe they're on the second or third. There's the new quasi-stealthy kind of Zumwalt DDG-51-like Type 055 destroyer. And then, of course, there's the second and third carriers that have worked. They kind of copied the U.S. Navy with dual carrier operations to show they could compete in terms of power projection in the Pacific. So what are some of your thoughts about how that seems to clearly be continuing to drive the threat equation and the need for the U.S. Navy to retain what, by any estimation, is its clear superiority despite China's numerical advantage? So what are some of your thoughts on that issue? Let's start with amphibs.
So as the chairman of the Amphib Coalition, I'm reluctant to respond to that question from a perspective for the coalition. But as a professional sailor, I've sailed the seas and saw the threat briefs. I got out of the Navy about 7 years ago. It causes concern, and it causes, and you're seeing the response, both in the CNO's naval strategy, and you're seeing the response with respect to either DMO or the decentralized type of warfare or the disparate warfare with autonomous vessels. The speed at which that response comes to fruition actually has some bearing on your previous question, which is the rate of those technical advancements put into the aircraft carriers very, very can be very frustrating at times. And what do I mean? They don't always go well with the first ship. DG-1000 is a great example. Where we do see that capability be realized and become cost-effective / realized capability at a right price point is usually third, fourth, fifth unit. So what we're going to see is this. Dave Forster's professional opinion, not the coalition nor Rolls-Royce. Is this. We're going to see us make some very good investments in R&D. You see that in the budget document. We're going to need to advance those R&D projects faster to keep up with the threat of the pace, in order to try and compete with a very high number quantity type of enemy.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Giannini, on the carrier front, certainly the Chinese indigenously built carriers, some of them, the newer ones, look kind of like a Ford ripoff. They don't have that ski jump. They have the larger deck space and straightaway to carry the carrier air wing. They're also fast developing the J-31, the fifth generation aircraft to be carrier launched, etc. So what are some of your thoughts, given their lesser number of carriers, but rapid progress, and much of what they report about their capable industrial base to build these in large numbers, build these faster? How quickly could they catch or kind of try and close the gap with U.S. carriers?
I can't really speak to their actual technology. I don't know that any of us could, but what I do know is that in terms of numbers of ships, they're building them faster than we are. They're not physically building the ships any faster. They have many more shipyards, and one of their largest shipyards is almost 4 times the size of Newport News Shipbuilding. So what that will tell you is that the threat for them to be around for many decades is real. And I think American technology today goes beyond just the ship. The whole carrier fleet strategy, the strategic strike group, the way they all communicate together is an advantage today that we hold over our competitors in China. And I think our advances continue as we look. That's going to continue with 80 and 81 will be even more advanced than 78 and 79. And I'm certain that this trend will continue when we get to the next block buy of 82 and 83. We'll have even more technology to keep us. But we have to increase the build rate. We have to maintain a minimum of 11 carriers. We, as an industrial base, would love to see us go to 12 and combat that threat head on.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'd want to talk for hours about multi-domain networking and being so key to the strategy moving forward with JADC2 and things along those lines. My question, which is pretty significant, is this sense of power projection. Certainly when it comes to stopping any kind of rapid fait accompli with China trying to annex Taiwan, Navy forward presence, just thinking about it, could kind of save the day. There's a real Pacific emphasis. There's a real forward presence, which is so key as a deterrent. It seems quite clear that F-35s, even carriers, might be in range should the presence be close enough to impact that, potentially deter it or even destroy it if it starts.
I would say, I'm more of a supply-based guy, not the technical guy, but I can agree with you that the presence of carriers in any domain are the greatest deterrent we have as a nation. We have the ability to fly 75 aircraft off of that carrier very quickly, and it's the most survivable airfield possible because it moves around. You don't know where it's going to be. It's not fixed. We just deployed the Truman to the Ukraine. So we're doing the same thought process that you just mentioned right there, right now. I think it will be able to help.
I remember years ago, members of Congress advocating for a 500-ship Navy, making the point that that was the case during the Reagan era. Many have also made the point that technological superiority is more important than sheer numbers. I recall writing an essay once about why not both, right? I mean, mass matters, to quote the famous Sun Tzu. I hear that a lot. So even if there is technological superiority, numbers could be quite important. What's your thought about this now? What seems to be a collective sense that there has to be an uptick, and 500 ships needs to be on the radar, regardless of your persuasion on that debate.
Yeah, my thought is this. In order to achieve that 500 ship Navy, certainly you need money. That's a given. But as we discussed a bit ago, the cost per copy drops the more copies you buy. It also drops with if you buy more in quantity. Now we're talking multi-million, if not billion-dollar weapon systems. So it's not necessarily as though we're buying dozens of eggs here. But if we can provide that stability such that we understand that there is a build program for X amphibs over 10 years, 12 years, and we can provide that stability to the marketplace, then we can come down the EOQ, we can come down the efficiency curves, and we can bring the cost down and improve delivery times. That's inherently true in industrial bases. It also allows us to bring in other possibly non-traditional shipyards or suppliers to try and solve that problem. So a bit of it is we've been in this budget cycle for 5, 6, 8 years now of continuing resolutions and instability in the budgets. With what we thought was in the fight up is no longer going to be bought. It's time to come to some efficiency here and some commitment that we're actually going to do this and do this right, realizing we will not have a 500 ship Navy tomorrow. It will take time.
Roger that. On the carrier front, Mr. Giannini?
I would 100% agree that the industrial supply base will be able to step up, but it's going to take the stable and predictable funding. You can't build the Navy with more ships without putting more dollars in, and they have to be multi-ship awards in order to get the benefit and to get the industrial base to be able to reinvest. If we know that we're going to get a block buy for 2 carriers or subs 10 at a time or LPDs 4 at a time, it allows us as manufacturers and supply base to reinvest in our business, just like the yards do, and improve the technology, get to the next level technology, bring additive machining in, which might be able to lower the cost, increase the quality of the product, and lighten it. All those things are possible when you know that things are going to be built. So that's where I would say we need to focus on is the.
Well, and certainly in terms of the industrial base, that's incredibly significant because if you have block buys, then you don't lose your skilled workforce as quickly or to the same extent. And isn't that a very, very fundamental element of sustaining the industrial base capacity to continue to propel this?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead, Rick.
We said it at the same time. It absolutely is. The industrial based workforce is what propels us and allows us to get these things done. It's in a difficult situation now, just like the rest of the United States is, with shortage of skilled workers. I know the Navy's working with $500 million worth of grant money, trying to get programs in place that will shorten the amount of time it takes from a tradesman. Instead of a typical 2-year process, they're putting them through schools now in 4 months and coming out ready to work in either a CNC, which is a machinist, a welder, additive machining, or quality. And we're trying to duplicate that across the country. It's going to take time, but if we can do that and get those people into the workforce quickly and continually, it will help us build that 500 ship Navy.
Well, my apologies. This is tough to think of as one of a number of issues of anything more pressing in terms of American security right now, given how the world is changing in the threat equation. So thanks for staying with us and embracing a handful of questions. And thank you so much for your time, Mr. Giannini, again, the CEO of the Aircraft Carrier Industrial Base Coalition, and Captain Foster, former surface warfare officer, who's the chairman of the Amphibious Warfare Industrial Base Coalition. We're really glad to have you in the center. We really appreciate your expertise and service. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.